Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's #2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And first up, China's holdings of US Treasuries have dropped to their lowest level since 2009, reflecting a strategic shift in Beijing's approach to managing its vast foreign reserves. Data from the US Treasury released this week showed that China's reported holdings fell by $57 billion in 2024, bringing its total to $759 billion. However, analysts believe the true number is likely higher, as China is increasingly holding US debt through intermediary accounts in other countries. UK-based The Financial Times writes that this decline is part of a broader trend that has seen China's reported holdings decrease by approximately $550 billion since their peak in 2011. While Japan remains the largest foreign holder of US Treasuries, China has been quietly reallocating its reserves into alternative assets, including gold. In the first quarter of 2024 alone, China added over 15 tons of gold to its reserves, contributing to a 12% rise in gold prices that year. It is suggested that China's move away from treasuries is not a simple financial decision, but is also a geopolitical one. Brad Setster of the Council on Foreign Relations, for example, observed this week, quote, "China made a decision around 2010 that holding treasuries was a risk," end quote, adding, quote, "It looked bad, optically, that so much of China's wealth was in the hands of a geopolitical rival," end quote. China's shift also comes at a time when the US faces growing budget deficits and the Federal Reserve is reducing its holdings of government debt. As a result, foreign ownership of treasuries has been closely watched by analysts. Interestingly, while China's direct holdings have fallen, countries such as Belgium, Luxembourg, and the UK have seen their reported treasury holdings rise, possibly due to Chinese investments being funneled through alternative financial centers. Despite this trend, some analysts believe China is not abandoning dollar-denominated assets entirely. Instead, it appears to be diversifying its portfolio by increasing exposure to agency bonds and other safe US debt instruments. If this is the case, it is very telling that even with all its talk of an alternative order and pushback against the US, China still holds trillions of its wealth in US assets. And speaking of US-China competition, next up, the US-based New York Times, citing, quote, "more than half a dozen current and former advisors and others familiar with Mr. Trump's thinking," end quote, is reporting that US President Donald Trump is considering a broad-reaching deal with General Secretary Xi Jinping, an agreement that could go beyond trade and into the realms of security and economic cooperation. The outlet adds that Trump sees an opportunity to forge a new agreement, despite the complexities and tensions that define the US-China relationship. During the previous Biden administration, Trump frequently lamented the fate of his 2020 trade deal with China, which he believed was not adequately enforced. In discussions at Mar-a-Lago, he reportedly criticized officials for failing to uphold the agreement, expressing his frustration over China's failure to purchase an additional $200 billion in American goods and services. Now, with a second term in office, Trump is seeking a more expansive accord. Trump's approach to negotiations has been marked by aggressive tactics, and this round of talks appears no different. He has already imposed a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports, describing it as an, quote, "opening salvo," end quote, a move that quickly drew retaliation from Beijing. His administration is also exploring the possibility of revoking China's Permanent Normal Trading Relations, PNTR status, a measure that could significantly impact economic relations between the two nations. Despite these tensions, Trump is signaling an openness to striking a deal. Michael Pillsbury, a China expert who advised him during his first term, has indicated that Trump is interested in a mutually beneficial arrangement. The administration is still debating key elements of a potential agreement, writes the New York Times, citing unnamed sources, including China's past non-compliance and strategies to bring Beijing back to the table. Among those encouraging Trump's efforts are influential business figures, including Elon Musk. The Tesla CEO has expressed confidence that deals can be reached, emphasizing the importance of US-China cooperation to avoid escalating conflicts. Trump's key economic advisors, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, are also involved in shaping the administration's strategy, discussing how to rebalance trade and encourage Chinese investment in the United States. From Beijing's standpoint, Trump remains an unpredictable figure. Chinese officials expect continued friction, but recognize that Trump's transactional nature may provide openings for negotiation. Reports suggest that Chinese policymakers are considering a proposal that would include large-scale investments in the US economy, potentially creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in sectors such as renewable energy and electric vehicles. Additionally, China may offer increased purchases of American exports and diplomatic cooperation on issues like North Korea and Ukraine. Despite Trump's desire to secure a new deal, significant hurdles remain. Many within his administration, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, view Chinese investment as a national security risk. Additionally, Congress and state governments have adopted increasingly strict policies regarding Chinese acquisitions in critical industries. Trump's willingness to negotiate in areas where others see threats, such as welcoming Chinese auto manufacturers to the US under the condition of local hiring, reflects a perhaps more pragmatic approach to diplomacy, though those with national security concerns will, be concerned. Trump's view of China has long been shaped by his personal interactions with Xi Jinping too. Unlike other policymakers who approach China from a more ideological or strategic standpoint, Trump sees the relationship as one that can be managed through direct engagement. His past rhetoric suggests he believes he can negotiate with Xi on a leader-to-leader basis. Whether he can or not, and whether Xi feels the same way, of course, are different questions. While Trump's interest in a new China deal is evident, the path forward remains uncertain. The geopolitical landscape has shifted since his first term, with heightened competition in technology, security, and global markets. The success of any negotiations will depend on whether both sides can bridge deep-seated differences and whether Trump's confrontational style will yield tangible results. And of course, even if both Xi and Trump wanted to get a deal done, the deep-seated mistrust on both sides is now deeply entrenched in both bureaucracies. As discussions evolve, the world watches to see whether Trump's return to power will mark a new phase in US-China relations or a continuation of the high-stakes economic rivalry that has defined the past decade. Okay, we have two more developments to cover, but just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, I have one big favor to ask. That is just to hit the like button, and if you have not done so already, subscribing is also a big help. The channel is just about to hit 120,000 subscribers. It would be wonderful if we could hit that with this video. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to go the extra mile and help keep China Update financially sustainable. Next up, yesterday we discussed a concerning near encounter in the South China Sea. Today we need to take note of a military matter quite farther afield. The Australian Navy is closely monitoring a Chinese naval task group that has sailed 150 nautical miles east of Sydney, marking the furthest south China's Navy has ventured along Australia's eastern coast. This unprecedented move underscores Beijing's growing ambition to project power beyond the traditional Pacific island chains. Two Australian warships are tracking the Chinese group, which includes the frigate Hengyang and cruiser Zunyi, and a supply vessel. According to sources, this deployment signifies China's strategic intent to expand its naval reach and influence in the Pacific. Charles Adil of the Washington-based CSIS think tank emphasized that China is testing its ability to threaten Australian interests and gauge the response to its extended presence. The Australian Defence Ministry has confirmed that the Chinese vessels are in international waters, and analysts suggest that this move aligns with Beijing's broader strategy of asserting dominance in key maritime regions. Richard McGregor of the Lowy Institute pointed out that China's persistent naval patrols, including this latest mission, reflect its long-term ambitions to challenge Australia and the United States in the Pacific. China's expanding military reach is not without precedent. Chinese naval ships previously visited Sydney in 2019, but that visit was coordinated with the Australian government. This latest deployment, however, appears to be unilateral, signalling a shift in Beijing's approach. As tensions rise, Australian officials, including her defence minister, remain vigilant. The incident comes amid increased military activities in the South China Sea, raising concerns about future confrontations in the region. And finally for today, the UK-based Financial Times reports that PRC authorities may delay granting Tesla approval of a license to begin training its FSD, full self-driving technology, in China. As veteran China analyst Bill Bishop observed on this development this week, quote, "This is a smart way to pressure Elon Musk to lobby President Trump to go soft on China. Given that BYD is now giving its autonomous driving tech away for free, it is not clear how much of a boost FSD would give Tesla in the PRC, and whether they can even charge for it now." End quote. The Financial Times article argues that Tesla's efforts to launch its FSD technology in China face potential delays as regulatory approval remains uncertain, deepening the company's challenges in the world's largest automotive market. Sources familiar with the matter indicate that Chinese authorities have not provided a clear timeline for granting Tesla a license to begin widespread FSD training, despite initial indications of approval by the second quarter of 2025. Tesla's FSD technology, which enables vehicles to accelerate, steer, brake, and change lanes with human supervision, represents a key revenue stream for the company. In the US, Tesla charges $99 per month for FSD access, and its expansion into China is seen as crucial for reviving sales amid growing competition from domestic rivals like BYD. Elon Musk's close ties to US President Donald Trump, along with Beijing and Washington's stringent data security policies, further complicate Tesla's position. The company cannot currently transfer training data outside of China, while US regulations prevent AI training within the country, creating a regulatory deadlock. Despite Tesla's early success in China with its Shanghai Gigafactory, local EV manufacturers have since outpaced it with competitive pricing and advanced features. Of course, massive state support also helps. Musk remains optimistic, predicting FSD will surpass human driving capability by year end, but his history of unmet deadlines raises skepticism on this point. Regulatory scrutiny in both the US and China will continue to shape Tesla's future in the automotive driving race. Meanwhile, on the theme of outside automakers now facing a more difficult Chinese domestic environment, for decades German automakers have dominated China's high-performance car market with their precision engineering and luxury branding. However, US-based Bloomberg in a piece this week argues that the tides have now shifted. Chinese manufacturers have redefined what it means to own a premium vehicle, prioritizing electric power, smart features, and affordability over traditional automotive prestige. One of the most striking examples of this is the Xiaomi SU7, a vehicle that mirrors the Porsche Taycan in power and performance but adds integrated artificial intelligence, offering features like automated parking and personalized driver greetings. With a price tag nearly half of that of the Porsche, it's no surprise that Xiaomi sold over 100,000 units last year, eating into Porsche's market share. This shift has had a direct impact on German automakers, particularly Porsche, which reported a 28% drop in deliveries in China in 2024. Although sales elsewhere were strong, the decline in China led to an overall 3% dip in global deliveries. Stefan Bretzel, director of the Center for Automotive Management in Germany, acknowledged the miscalculation of Western automakers, stating, quote, "The German, but also the American and Japanese Korean manufacturers have greatly underestimated the development dynamics of the Chinese manufacturers, namely in the important fields of electromobility and software-defined vehicles." End quote. Chinese consumers, once devoted to German luxury brands, are now fully embracing domestic alternatives. Economist Gary Ng of Natixis Corporate and Investment Banking noted this week, quote, "Chinese consumers right now are ready to accept that Chinese companies can produce cars that are considered as premium to them." End quote. Meanwhile, Xiaomi is pushing forward with its SU7 Ultra, breaking records in Germany, outpacing the Taycan by 20 seconds. Quote, "With German car makers, we have to be at least as much or more innovative as we are more expensive," end quote, said Bretzel. Adding, quote, "and that has gradually been lost," end quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.